Hello, welcome to Jazz Is
Jazz's
MasterClass series
at the National Jazz Museum.
At the National Jazz Museum in Harlem.
I am Sekou McMillan, the curator of special projects.
My name is Albert Marquez, Zach O'Farrell.
My name is Shirazette Titten.
And we are in conversation with the legendary Bertha Hope. Jazz could only have happened here in America.
The key to everything was the radio.
So this world is too dense. 15 minutes isn't enough to cover it all.
Are you ready? I am.
One of that era that I came from that actually informs a lot of what's going on today.
And now we get to 1960. What inspires you to move to New York?
Actually, I was on the road with a band led by a dancer who had left Hollywood sort of because she was caught in that Hollywood precarious position that they put Black people in. She was too light to be dark and too dark to be light in the movie industry. So they didn't really know what to do with her. But she was a brilliant dancer. So while she was waiting for roles in Hollywood, she put together a dance troupe and traveled across the United States from across Route 66. In fact, there's a song that talks about Route 66 that Nat Cole did, and all of those cities that he talks about, he lay exactly the way he sings about them on the map. So we went the Southern route, and this was during the very beginning of the civil rights sit-ins and demonstrations for rights in the South. So it was a very, very interesting trip because it was part Air Force officers clubs and part nightclubs in the city. So we met with some ugly circumstances, but we survived them all. And ended up in Florida when we found out that the New York engagement was canceled. So everybody had a decision to make if they were going to go themselves to New York or go back to Japan. At the time, by then I was married to Elmo, whom I had met in 1957 when he was with Chet Baker. And so he really wanted to come back to New York. So the decision was really a kind of a mutual one between me and my husband. He wanted to come back. Although the conditions for him coming back were not the best, but the energy for him in Los Angeles was a lot left to be desired for him. So we came. I had always wanted to come to New York, but I didn't know it would be exactly that way. But that's what actually happened. So I traveled to New York, and he came from California with a record contract that had been decided on before his arrival, that he would record when he got here. And that record happened to include, it turned out to be a homecoming kind of album, and he included me on it for 2 or 3 selections. So that was something that has also lasted.
well, as a young couple too, right? From Los Angeles to New York, what was the biggest change that you experienced, or you both experienced, I guess, at that
Well,
time?
he was a native New Yorker, so coming here was not culture shock for him. It was a culture shock for me, for sure.
Exactly.
I guess the biggest impact was how close people lived.
Hmm.
Because I came from a place where there were trees and grass and, you know, houses and garages and driveways. And so just the idea of all these people.
Were you here in
And,
Harlem, or where were you back when
no, we were in the Bronx.
in the Bronx?
My first view of New York was really from the Bronx. And we came to Manhattan all the time, but we lived in the Bronx. And he had originally lived in Manhattan, was born in Manhattan, but he was first uh, of immigrant parents from the Caribbean. His father was from Barbados and his mother was from Antigua. So he was first generation born here. And they lived in Manhattan. So going to the Bronx was an upwardly mobile kind of move for that family. So that was my experience of coming here.
Wow. So now you're in New York, and what comes to fruition with any special projects that you started working on once you came to New York?
Well, basically, I was trying to support my husband's kind of re-entry. Um, so I went to work in the telephone company to support that, so that we could see if he could regain, first of all, his cabaret license, which was a big thing at that time. I don't know what it is now, but to not have a cabaret license meant that you could not work in a place that sold alcohol. So the major work at that time, there were not so many master classes or things of that kind. It was to get back into the nightclub circuit. So that's what we were hoping was going to happen. So I took this job just to keep us afloat until something better could happen. But on the weekends, I was still looking to see what I could accomplish. So I worked in a room called with Mickey and Sylvia's Club Morocco. And one of the first jobs I got there was with a band called the Jimmy Castro Band that was just about to break and become fairly well known. And that's just about the time that I left. Um, and then I worked up in Canada with people like Sonny Greer, who used to be the drummer for the Duke Ellington Band. And I was just meeting a lot of people who I could perhaps define myself with. So that was pretty much how that next part of my life developed, was trying to support family while Elmo looked to reconstruct some of his career. So he did a lot of recording when he came back. 1961, I think, was when we did the Riverside album. And then he did some trio albums with Philly Joe Jones and Paul Chambers. but he never regained his cabaret license. So actually, I kind of shelved everything until I could see if I could get a footing on my own. And that really took a long time. It almost died in 1967. So by that time, I had 3 kids. So I was a really young widow and faced with really being the only breadwinner for my children at that point. And so that was how I really started to look at how I could get into music and make that work for me. So that took a while. That took some years while I helped to raise my kids. My kids were, my mother-in-law was very helpful. And so it took me until maybe the early 80s before I just really launched myself as a full-time musician. But in between, I went back to school and earned my degree, finished my degree in early childhood education, ran a daycare center. I taught Head Start. I opened up music and art parts in the Head Start program. And I ran a daycare center in Brooklyn, all just to stay afloat and continue to write and meet musicians. On the weekends, I had a band in New Jersey, and that band did not record, but we worked every weekend while I was teaching and running the daycare center, which was later. But I always had a band connection on the weekends and stayed busy that way. One of the really good bands that I put together, unfortunately, didn't record. Then I put together an all-women's band, and that band stayed together for about 15 years. And we toured Europe. And we did record at Kennedy Center, but it was a bootleg recording. So I don't know if you dial up Kennedy Center, you might still be able to find a fragment of that concert that we did there. And we were awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award by Dr. Billy Taylor. So that's all part of who I am.
As a woman, do you feel that it was a big shift from being in Los Angeles to New York? Did you feel a big difference being here?
Okay, well, let me tell you, the New York, the Los Angeles scene was a really very segregated scene. I mean, there were 2 unions, one for blacks and one for whites. So as a woman, I don't think I even thought too much about, because there were not, I didn't meet that many women, so not in Los Angeles, no, and not for a long time after I got here. I didn't meet a lot of women who were in the industry. But when I did, I found out that it's really it's still a segregated, pretty segregated scene of women musicians who are white, women musicians who are Black or others, Black and brown, the opportunities we get are much different and sometimes non-existent, or the clubs, the ways that you meet other people are either all white or all Black. This is my experience. As far as being able to work, it's still a man's field. And jazz has always been sort of at the bottom of all of the other art forms that are about music. And bebop, I think, was one of that era that I came from, that actually informs a lot of what's going on today, is still a music that's the least heard and the least revered. I mean, there are lots and lots of fans of the music, but it doesn't filter down too much to the younger generations. They're into neo soul and more and more rhythm and blues, but and more rap oriented kind of music that didn't that that had a lot of its roots in that music. So I find it has always been hard to penetrate into the male world, so to speak. And it's getting better because there are more women, many more women now. So they are beginning to be seen and heard at a different level. But for the differences between LA and New York, since I don't have much basis for comparison for working with or knowing women, I just know that if they were there, they were hidden either one in men's bands or just not working in very public places and churches, places that were not so public.